Hi friends, I'm Chelsea Grayson coming to you once again from the Office of the CEO. This is my show where I can help you be more successful in your current career, and I can also help you successfully transition to a new career. Today I wanted to talk to you guys about the basic building blocks and the core competencies that go into being a successful leader. So let's just dive right into it. So I think when you decide that you are going to lead, or when you're thrust into a leadership position, the very first thing you should do is sit down and have a chat with yourself. Center yourself on what are your core values. Who are you at the core of yourself? What are the principles and core values that you believe in, and that you want to espouse on as a leader, the things that you want to pass along to your team? Again, if folks on your team don't particularly agree with or aren't aligned with your core values, of course, they can always leave. Nobody is bound to work for you forever. But you certainly want to be centered on and have a very concrete set of core values at the center of you so that you can exude that strength and people will have some sense of what it is that they're following when they're following you as a leader. So sit down and assess what your core values are. And some examples of core values, right, might be integrity, accountability, the ability to admit when you've made a mistake or when you're wrong about something, and take responsibility for that and learn from that mistake and maybe get advice from others in terms of how to do things better. Even, for example, accountability as a leader can be when you take responsibility for something that your team has done wrong, for an error that your team has made or a mistake that your team has made. And that is part of being a leader as well, is the buck stops here, right? So integrity and accountability when it comes to those sorts of concepts. Vision, right? Have the ability to develop a vision or a long-term goal, and then have the ability to have passion and be a visionary for implementing that vision. And along with that goes persistence, which is part of being passionate about something, but also the ability to communicate to your team, this is my vision, these are my visions, these are the things that we're working towards, here's why I'm so passionate about it, here's why I want you to get on board with it as well. Now, part of what goes into that, of course, and I've talked about this before, is the idea of being able to build consensus among your team that this is, in fact, the thing that we want to work for. And I'll get to that a little bit later in this episode. And then what about humility, right? Again, that sort of goes along with accountability, but it's also the ability to admit that you don't know everything, that you've put this team together because they are experts in their different core competencies, and that you'll have to rely on them for various pieces of advice or guidance along the way, that you're not perfect at everything, and that's exactly why you've assembled this team. So the idea of humility, that you have the ability to make mistakes, you don't know everything, that once in a while you're going to lean on your team members. And folks like to see that, right? They don't want you to walk around with this individual mythology that you're perfect, because nobody's perfect, and they can definitely see your flaws just as well as you can. Courage. It takes a lot of courage to be a leader. You're out there in front, you're running point, you're running flank, you're running the sides, right? Some people have said that being the CEO of a company or being the leader of a big organization or a big team is actually the most alienating job on the face of the planet. It's the loneliest seat that you can sit in, right? Because you absolutely have to be brave to be out there and put yourself out there first, even if you've got foot soldiers to sort of implement the day-to-day tasks. Your name, your reputation, sometimes your safety, you are out there on the front line much more than anyone else. Again, goes back to the buck stops with you, right? And you want to think about, in terms of your core values, sort of why is it that you're leading? What made you step up and want to lead in this situation? So are you leading because it's something that you personally believe in, something that you personally want to implement for yourself and just for the moment, and you were good enough to recruit folks to follow along and help you? Or are you leading for legacy purposes, right? Are you leading, for example, a big company that you'll be making succession plans so that once you step out of the leadership role, there will be people to fill in or a person to fill in, and generations after that will be trained and educated properly to continue to fill in that leadership role, so that this organization, this team, what have you, will continue long after you're gone, long after you're dead, right? But the legacy is why you're leading so effectively now. Sometimes that can be for selfish reasons because you want your name to always be attached to an organization that was successful for decades and decades and decades, right? But it also might be philanthropic in the sense that you certainly believe this organization should exist for a long time because it benefits people or it brings products to people or services to people who need it. And you want to make sure that it continues to build and grow and progress even after you're gone. So think about the reasons why you've stepped into this leadership position. I want to make a quick side note here because I continue to say that you've stepped into this leadership position or you've chosen to lead. That can happen sometimes without a change in title, without anybody telling you that you're now in a leadership position or a high-level leadership position. Sometimes these things happen very naturally, and maybe it's only later that your organization realizes, oh, they actually need to have a step up in title, maybe even a promotion or a bonus for having stepped up to lead this way. But sometimes it can happen in sort of a sneaky way like that. And sometimes leadership is thrust on you. Right. Again, if there is no succession planning, in any sort of formal sense at your organization, so you weren't aware that you would ever be stepping into a leader's position, but the leader falls ill, retires, is terminated, what have you, and all of a sudden you've been asked to step in and assume that leadership role. That's something that you might not have necessarily contemplated that you would step into. You hadn't imagined that you would step into it. Maybe you had, but you didn't realize it was going to happen so soon because there was no official succession plan in place, but now it's been put on you. So there's all sorts of different ways that we step into leadership positions, right? But if you're going to be a successful leader, and if it's in you to do that, then it really doesn't matter how you step into that position. You will step up. That's the most important thing to keep your eyes on. So let's talk a little bit about the sorts of core competencies and basic building blocks that go into making a good leader, and maybe some of the things that you'd want to push to the side because they'll detract from the quality of your leadership. So for sure, you are going to want to take stock of other leaders that have either led you in the past or that you see leading around you. You'll take lessons from them in terms of how to do something. You'll take lessons from them in terms of how not to do something. I know all of us, as we came up through the ranks, right? We had great leaders, but then sometimes even with those great leaders, we'd sit back and say, wow, if I was running things, I probably would have done that a little bit differently, right? Or wow, we just came out of a meeting where usually my boss shines, but she didn't do so great today. What happened there? And you'll always remember those moments. Those will be incredibly pivotal because those sorts of things will happen when you become a leader. But because you've already seen it once, you'll now know, oh, I always wanted to approach this differently when it happened before, right? So be sure and take stock of the leaders that are around you or that you came up under. Check in once a year at a minimum with your subordinates to ask them how you're doing. They're not giving you a report card, right? This doesn't go into your annual performance evaluation unless that's part of what your company does in terms of determining how you've done over the course of the year. But it's nice to check in and get as authentic as you can a response from someone who works for you, right? And depends on you for their livelihood, because that'll help you. You can show them that you incorporate some of their comments as you move forward into the next year. That'll make them much more devoted followers, actually, but it will actually genuinely improve your leadership abilities, right? But also make sure and check in with your superiors. And this is even to the extent that it's not time for your annual review, or maybe you're not in a situation where you're necessarily getting a formal annual review every year. Maybe you're at the top of the organization. You're the CEO and your boss is the board, right? And so not giving you an annual performance review per se, right? It comes in a little bit of a different format when you're the CEO. Maybe you're the chair of the board. So it's really just the colleagues that you sit with on the board, shoulder to shoulder, that can give you an assessment. But make sure and touch base with folks at least once a year, just specifically on leadership abilities and leadership qualities, and ask them if they would like to see you lead differently or if they'd like to see you continue on the way that you're going. So again, very specifically in respect of how am I doing at the top of my organization, whether it's a little division in your organization or whether it's at the very tippy top of the organization. Back to consensus building, and I've said this in previous episodes, you for sure want to hone your consensus building skills You want to make sure that you back channel with folks, that you talk to folks outside of formal meeting settings. You want to make sure that you get everyone's buy-in and guidance and advice and input when it comes to various initiatives that you're thinking about implementing and how you want to implement those initiatives. And that again is specifically because you want their buy-in. You want that whenever it is that you pull the trigger and make the decision to do X, Y, and Z, that everyone's had a chance to contribute. They all feel like they're part of the team that led to this particular initiative being implemented and implemented in the way it's being implemented, so that they'll all be a lot more enthusiastic about pitching in their own way. So for sure you want to hone your consensus building skills. But, and I've also said this in previous episodes, but it bears repeating, you also want to be able to make a decision. Once you've received everyone's input, it is up to you as the leader, and they are looking to you as the leader to make an actual decision about what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. They don't want you waffling at the end. They don't want you wringing your hands and expressing regret about what you did or how you did it. Make a decision and move forward with it. You can learn if you made the wrong decision, but they definitely want to see you making the decision, because if you're not doing that, they're going to lose confidence very quickly. And another tip I'd like to give is you are not your subordinate's friend when you're leading. You don't want to be unfriendly, but you're not their friend. That will be incredibly awkward if you're their friend when it comes to you issuing directives, when it comes to you giving criticism, when it comes to you potentially having to terminate them. All sorts of boundaries get crossed all the time that I see in the workplace, and it's because bosses become friends with their subordinates. Don't do it. Again, you're not friends, you're not unfriendly, but you're not friends. And I'll go one step further, actually, in terms of you're not unfriendly. Don't fall into the trap that a lot of leaders fall into, where they feel like they can sort of bully or intimidate their subordinates. You don't see it so much now anymore today, but you do see pockets of it. People feel like once they get into a position of power that they need to be sort of cranky, or they need to bully a little bit or intimidate in order to get the things that they want out of their subordinates. That's an extreme that's also not okay under any circumstances. And quite frankly, these days, it can land you in some liability, some hot water when it comes to potential litigation or discrimination or harassment lawsuits. So you for sure also don't want to get over to the side of bullying or intimidation. You don't have to be mean to be an effective leader, but you also don't have to be everyone's friend. I think that's about it. The one thing I did want to say is, again, this goes back to the comment about how being a leader can sometimes be the loneliest job on the face of the planet. That goes along with one of my favorite sayings, which is, heavy is the head that wears the crown, right? So you get the crown, you get to live in the palace, you get all the good stuff that comes along with that, but with that, you bear enormous responsibility. You always bear the risk that you will be terminated in grand style, right? Because you're up there in a very high profile position. And if you make bad enough mistakes or errors in judgment, you'll be terminated in just the same sort of high profile fashion, right? So you always bear that risk. And you just simply bear the risk of leading your folks or your team down the wrong road, or when you make a bad decision, and then you've got to bear responsibility for that. So heavy is the head that wears the crown. You get the crown, but you have enormous responsibility. You take enormous risk. You have an enormous set of obligations that are high risk for everyone on the team that's following you. So you truly need to self-assess whether or not you want to be a leader and why it is that you want to be a leader. If people have told you all your life just that it's the right thing to get to the top of an organization or a division, that it's the right thing to want to be a leader, don't be a follower, all those sorts of things, sit back and think, is it just peer pressure? Is it just what society thinks that's making me want to lead? Or is there something truly in me which will make me a great leader and which makes me want to be a leader, which makes me passionate about leading? Not everyone has it in them, and that's perfectly fine. Or sometimes you've just exhausted your desire to lead and you'll now want to take a back seat because it's just an absolutely exhausting job. But give yourself the flexibility. Be kind to yourself when assessing whether you want to take on all of that, because it is a huge job and it's not always one that comes out perfectly. So if you don't want to mar your track record, you might not want to take that extra jump. On the flip side, being a great leader and having a wonderful team under you is just about the best feeling you can ever get. You're pumped with adrenaline every day. This is why leaders are driven to inspire their teams and driven to inspire the world by the things that they're putting out, because they are feeling that adrenaline every single day by leading a team that is then running on all fours and running like a well-oiled machine. That is also an incredible feeling. And so if you can extract that feeling from being a leader, and if you feel like you're doing a great job putting out whatever product or service it is you're putting out, then again, that's the way to go. So I hope that helps you understand sort of some of the core competencies and some of the basic building blocks that go into being a successful leader. To be sure, I will be discussing this on future episodes. This is a huge topic. I just sort of wanted to give you guys a little bit of a broad brush stroke into this area. Please do subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you don't miss future episodes, and I will see you next time from the Office of the CEO.